It was a normal Wednesday. 11 in the morning. School recess. 200 children playing under the Australian sun. And then, someone screamed. In the next 20 minutes, more than 200 people, students aged 6 to 17, teachers, local residents, observed something in the sky that they could not explain. A silver object. Pursued by airplanes. That landed in a field. 40 minutes later, the military arrived. Witnesses were threatened. Evidence disappeared. A student was taken away in an ambulance and never returned to school. Her entire family vanished. 59 years later, the Australian government still has not offered an official explanation. Westall 1966, the case of the 200 witnesses. On April 6, 1966, on the outskirts of Melbourne, Australia, one of the best documented mass UFO sightings in history occurred. It wasn't a nighttime sighting. It wasn't a distant light. It wasn't a lone witness of questionable credibility. It happened in broad daylight, lasted for more than 20 minutes, and was witnessed by over 200 people ranging in age from 6 to 60. Among them were teachers, a science teacher who declared himself a UFO skeptic, students, and local residents. What makes it truly disturbing is not just what they saw. It's what happened afterward. The way the authorities responded. The systematic way in which evidence disappeared. The threats against witnesses. The official silence that persists to this day. This is not a case of lights in the sky that could be anything. This is an event with names, surnames, exact dates, recorded testimonies, and contemporary journalistic coverage. And yet, officially, it never happened. Today we're going to review every detail of this case. The testimonies. The evidence. The theories. And the mysteries that, almost 6 decades later, remain unanswered. To understand what happened in Westall, we first need to understand where and when we are. April 1966. Australia is in the midst of the Cold War. The country has been sending troops to Vietnam since the previous year. The space race between the United States and the Soviet Union is at its peak. In the Pacific, both superpowers have been conducting nuclear tests. Clayton South is a suburb southeast of Melbourne. Working class. Quiet. 21 kilometers from the city center. The kind of place where everyone knows each other. There are 2 schools side by side, Westall High School and Westall Primary School. Between them, there are over 350 students. Behind the schools is an open area called the Grange Reserve. Grass, a few pine trees, nothing special. Wednesday, April 6, 1966, is a perfect day. Clear skies. Bright sunshine. It's autumn in Australia, so the weather is ideal. It's the second week of the school year after the summer holidays. In one of the classrooms at Westall High School, a science teacher named Andrew Greenwood is teaching his class. It's his first year at Westall. He's in his early 20s. He's an educated man with a scientific background. And, as he would later admit, he was skeptical about UFOs. Let's remember that detail. Because in less than an hour, Andrew Greenwood would see something that would change his perspective forever. Something for which he would be threatened in his own home. Something that would make him leave Westall the following year. In the classrooms and courtyards, 200 students. Elementary school children aged 6, 7, and 8. High school teenagers. Some, like 14-year-old Marilyn Eastwood, are in physical education class. Others, like Terry Peck and Joy Clarke, are enjoying recess. None of them know that in the next few minutes they will witness something they will remember with absolute clarity 50 years later. It's approximately 11 in the morning. And someone looks up at the sky. Andrew Greenwood is in his classroom. The door bursts open. A student rushes in, hysterical. "Professor! There's a flying saucer outside." Greenwood thinks the boy has gone crazy. Literally, that's his first reaction. He ignores him. But the student persists. He keeps shouting. Other students begin to peer out of the windows. Show, recreation of the school, seen from the classroom. Greenwood, more to calm the student than for any other reason, leaves the classroom. And look at this. Groups of students throughout the school, frozen, staring northeast. Some are pointing. Others are shouting. Some of the younger children are crying. It's the end of the world, some of the little ones shout. Greenwood follows the direction of their gazes. And there, floating near some power lines, is something he would later describe as a silvery gray object. In his interview with Dr. James McDonald a year later, a recording that still exists in the archives of the University of Arizona, Greenwood described it this way. It looked like a thin beam of light, about half the length of a light aircraft. It was silvery gray in color and seemed to thicken at times. The thickening was similar to when a disc is tilted slightly to show the underside. At the adjacent elementary school, the younger children see it too. In total, between both schools, more than 200 pairs of eyes are fixed on that object. The object is not still. It moves. It hovers above the posts of a soccer goal. Then it drifts south, over some nearby market gardens. And then, the planes appear. Up to 5 small aircraft. Witnesses describe them as Cessna type. Light planes. And they are clearly chasing the object. Or trying to circle around it. This is where the story gets really strange. Andrew Greenwood observes for almost 20 minutes. And what he sees is unlike anything he has ever seen before. In his own words, each time the planes got too close to the object, it would slowly accelerate, then accelerate rapidly and move away from them and stop. Then they would take off after it again and the same thing would happen. Think about that for a moment. A science teacher. Observing for 20 minutes. Watching maneuvers he describes as the most amazing flight I've ever seen. Here's the first problem. Moorabbin Airport is only miles away. Greenwood knows about aircraft. The students are familiar with airplanes. Clayton South is close to an air route. And when Moorabbin Airport and the Royal Australian Air Force were later asked about those aircraft, they both said the same thing: we had no aircraft in that area. The object moves south. It begins to descend. And it disappears behind a row of pine trees in the Grange Reserve, the field behind the schools. The teachers shout orders. Stay where you are. Go back to class. But dozens of students disobey. They jump the fence. They run toward the Grange. Terry Peck was one of the first. Years later he would recall the feeling of running towards that field. And something more. I could feel the heat and hear this buzzing sound. Tanya, we only know her first name, was the best runner in the school. A Yugoslavian immigrant. 14 years old. She arrives first at the area where the object has landed. What happens next is one of the most disturbing mysteries of the entire case. Tanya collapses. She is found in a state that witnesses describe as delirious. She is overwhelmed and unable to speak coherently. An ambulance is called. 2 other girls who arrived shortly afterward also faint. Tanya is taken to the hospital. And he never goes back to school. Meanwhile, the object that has descended near or above the ground suddenly rises again. Multiple witnesses see this. It rises vertically. It tilts at an angle. The silvery surface reflects the sun with an intense brilliance that makes some witnesses blink. And then it disappears. It doesn't drift away slowly. It vanishes at a speed that witnesses would describe as unholy, heading northwest. Colin Kelly, a student who saw it all from the football field, would recall it like this 50 years later. They simply rose up while on their side and disappeared at an unholy speed. They were faster than any aircraft of the time. They were by no means weather balloons. Oh, by the way, Colin Kelly didn't see one object. He saw 3. One large one flanked by 2 smaller ones. The students who have rushed towards the Grange find something more. In the grass, there is a circle. Or according to some testimonies, 3 circles. The grass is, witnesses have trouble describing it. Some say burnt. Others say boiled. Others say flattened into a perfect circular pattern. The tops of some nearby pine trees are blackened, as if something hot had passed over them. It's approximately 11:30 in the morning. 30 minutes have passed since it all began. And now comes the part that turns this from a strange sighting into something much more disturbing. In the next 40 minutes, the following arrive. An ambulance for Tanya and the other girls. Police cars. Military trucks. Air Force personnel. People in uniforms that some witnesses describe as blue, not standard Australian. The entire area of the Grange is cordoned off. No one is allowed to enter. People with scientific equipment are examining the site. There are guards on the perimeter. Andrew Greenwood and a few others, knowing the terrain, manage to sneak in. Greenwood sees the circle in the grass with his own eyes. He sees the people in uniforms taking samples, measuring, and photographing. Colin Kelly remembers seeing something else. The Air Force and the Army had the area cordoned off, and at one point they cut the grass so that nothing remained at the landing site. But the response isn't just on the field. At the school, a Channel 9 crew, one of Melbourne's leading television networks, has arrived. They have cameras. They begin interviewing excited students. The children speak rapidly about what they saw. The cameras roll. This is going to be on the news that very night. But then, a police officer and a teacher intervene. They order the students to go back inside. Immediately. The report aired that night. Multiple witnesses watched it at home. The Channel 9 reporter remembers it clearly. That recording no longer exists. Channel 9 typically preserves all its archives permanently. Extensive searches have been carried out in Melbourne and Sydney. The recording cannot be located. The following day, April 7th, Melbourne's leading newspaper, The Age, published a short article. The headline: Object perhaps balloon, the object is perhaps a balloon. It suggests it may have been a weather balloon launched from Laverton Air Force Base. Westerly winds could have carried it to the area. End of story. But in schools, something very different is happening. Westall High School Principal Frank Sambold called a special assembly. Students who were there remember it vividly. The headmaster calls the UFO sighting a load of rubbish. He warns the students that they will be severely punished if they speak to anyone about the incident, especially the press. Inform the teaching staff that they could lose their jobs if they discuss what happened. Marilyn Eastwood, the 14-year-old girl who made the only contemporary drawing of the object, is brought into the director's office. She is severely reprimanded for having spoken to a journalist. His drawing appeared a week later in the Dandenong Journal, the local newspaper. It is the only surviving contemporary visual record. 2 weeks after the incident, Andrew Greenwood is at home. It is night. There is a knock at the door. They are 2 men. One is dressed in civilian clothes. The other is a senior officer in the Royal Australian Air Force. They tell Greenwood he's wrong about what he saw. Greenwood, being who he is, insists. He knows what he saw. He was a science teacher. He wasn't confused. The men change tactics. If he continues talking, they say, he'll be charged with being drunk on duty. He'll lose his job. They cite the Official Secrets Act. Years later, Greenwood would describe that visit in one word: absolutely threatening. Greenwood leaves Westall the following year. He teaches at another school. For decades, he barely speaks of the incident. Do you remember Tanya? The girl who collapsed near the object. The one who was taken away in an ambulance. Some of her friends went to visit her at her house that same night. They wanted to see how she was doing. A woman opened the door. They didn't recognize her. She wasn't Tanya's mother. The woman told them that Tanya and her family had never lived there. He told them to leave. And never to come back. Tanya never returned to school. The family was never seen in the neighborhood again. In 2010, documentary filmmaker Rosie claimed to have tracked her down. But she has never shared any public information about her whereabouts or what happened to her. Let's take stock of what disappeared or was never found. Missing. The Channel 9 film, broadcast but not archived. The photographs of Barbara Robbins, the teacher who took photos with a 35mm camera. The photographs taken of the site by the Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society days later. All police records of the incident. All military records of the incident. All Air Force records. The documentation of the alleged Hubble weather balloon that would explain everything. Denied. That there were planes from Moorabbin Airport in the area. That the Air Force had aircraft there. That the Air Department knew something about the incident. That the Army would have responded. The only things that survived were the articles from the Dandenong Journal of April 1966. 2 consecutive front pages. Interviews with Greenwood and students. The drawing of Marilyn. That newspaper became the most requested item in their archive, with requests from all over the world. So what really happened in Westall on April 6, 1966? 59 years have passed. Exhaustive investigations have been carried out. Skeptical and believing researchers have analyzed every detail. And there is still no consensus. Let's review the main explanations, with their arguments in favor and their problems. Theory 1. The Hubble globe. This is the main skeptical explanation. Proposed by Australian researcher Keith Basterfield in 2014 after years of archival research. Hubble stands for High Altitude Balloon. Between 1960 and 1969, Australia and the United States operated a joint program. They launched giant polyethylene balloons from Mildura, Victoria. They ascended to over 100,000 feet to monitor atmospheric radiation from nuclear tests. It was a classified program. Cold War. Sensitive. The case in favor of Hubble. One of these balloons, Flight 292, was scheduled to launch on April 5, 1966, the day before Westall. The westerly winds that day could theoretically have carried it from Mildura to Clayton south. A Hubble balloon, when partially deflated, can resemble a silver disk. The balloons would eventually burst and descend by parachute. The supply department would send planes to track and recover them because they sometimes caused damage upon landing. Show images of Hubble balloons in flight. If it was classified, that would explain why the authorities responded so quickly. Why they suppressed the information. Why they denied there were planes. They were from the Hubble program, not the local airport. Problems with Hubble theory. First, there is no confirmation that Flight 292 actually launched. Documentation of that specific launch is absent from the National Archives. Basterfield himself admits that he could not confirm it. Second, witnesses described clever maneuvers. The object accelerating as the planes approached. Stopping. Evading. Balloons don't do that. Balloons drift with the wind. Third, Colin Kelly and others saw 3 objects. Hubble was launching balloons individually. Fourth, the high-speed disappearance. Multiple witnesses saw the object disappear at an unholy speed. Balloons don't disappear suddenly. They descend by parachute. Fifth, the physical effects. The heat Peck felt. The buzzing. The burned or boiled grass. The blackened treetops. A descending balloon wouldn't produce that. And sixth, perhaps most importantly, Andrew Greenwood was a science teacher. He knew about weather balloons. He observed this for 20 minutes. And he said that what he saw was unlike anything he had ever seen before. But something else doesn't add up. If it was just a classified balloon, why was the level of suppression so extreme? Theory 2. Experimental military technology. Was it some kind of secret aircraft? A classified military project? It's 1966. Cold War. The technological race is at its peak. The United States had bases in Australia. Both countries were developing advanced technology. The arguments. If it was a test of advanced military technology, that would explain. The quick answer: they knew I was there. Suppression, protecting military secrets. Threats under the Official Secrets Act. Why is there still no official explanation? The problems. The maneuvers described were decades ahead of any technology known in 1966. Instant acceleration. Silent flight. Disappearance at impossible speeds. None of the aircraft subsequently declassified match the descriptions. And there's a huge logistical problem. Who would conduct a top-secret technology test on 2 schools full of children? In broad daylight. During recess. It's against all military protocol. If it crashes, if it fails, you have hundreds of witnesses. It's the worst possible place for a secret test. Theory 3, extraterrestrial phenomenon. And then there's the explanation that the witnesses have never ruled out, that what they saw was not of this world. The arguments. 200 witnesses. Ages from 6 to 60 years. Observation for 20 to 30 minutes. Full daylight. Clear skies. The maneuvers described: impossible acceleration, instantaneous changes of direction, extraordinary escape velocity. Nothing from 1966, and little from 2025, can do that. The physical effects: marks on the ground, affected vegetation, effects on control samples. The pattern of circles in the grass. And then there's the official response. Or rather, the lack of an official response. 59 years later, no Australian government agency has offered an official explanation. When there are mundane explanations, lost planes, weather balloons, military exercises, governments eventually admit it. Here, there is only silence. The problems. There is no preserved physical evidence that can be scientifically analyzed. The site was quickly disturbed. The landowner burned the field days later, supposedly to discourage onlookers. We don't have the photographs. We don't have the television film. We don't have soil samples. We have testimonies. Consistent. Detailed. Lasting. But testimonies nonetheless. The unresolved issues. Regardless of which theory you prefer, there are elements that no explanation fully resolves. Who were the 2 men who visited Greenwood? Under what authority were they acting? Where is the Channel 9 film? It wasn't accidentally lost from the permanent archives. What happened to Tanya? Why did her family disappear? Why are official records systematically missing? Police, military, Air Force. All gone. Where did the pursuing planes come from? Both local authorities denied it. And here's the most unsettling part: if it was a weather balloon, an atmospheric phenomenon, or even a routine military test, why this level of secrecy? Why threaten the teacher at his home? Why threaten to ruin his career? Why terrorize elementary school children to keep them from speaking out? This suggests that what happened in Westall was more than a misunderstanding. It was something someone needed to keep hidden. Desperately. The legacy of Westall. In 2010, researcher Shane Ryan achieved something remarkable. After years of searching, he reunited dozens of the original witnesses. Many had not seen each other for over 40 years. They met in the same field where it all happened. And something surprising happened. Each one, separately, had remained silent for decades. For fear of not being believed. For fear of ridicule. Some because of the threats they had received. But when they reunited, when they were finally able to talk to each other, they discovered that they all remembered the same thing. The same details. The same maneuvers. The same 20 minutes that changed their lives. Marilyn Smith, formerly Eastwood, the girl who made the drawing, said this. When you're young and you see these things, you think, was that real? Did I really see that? But there were hundreds of other kids who saw it. I feel privileged to have witnessed the event. Andrew Greenwood, the skeptical professor, in a 2021 interview, almost 60 years later, said, I saw a craft. An intelligently controlled mechanical object hovering above me. I know what I saw. And nothing will ever make me doubt that. These aren't believers seeking attention. They are people who lived through something extraordinary. Who were silenced, threatened, and who, decades later, simply wanted acknowledged that something happened. The permanent questions. The Westall case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How many witnesses do we need before we take something seriously? Is 200 enough? Is including teachers and adults enough? Is 20 minutes of observation in broad daylight enough? What constitutes proof? We have multiple, consistent, and lasting testimonies. We have contemporary journalistic coverage. We have documented evidence of official suppression. We have interview recordings. What are we missing? The photos that disappeared. The film that vanished. The official records that never existed or that were destroyed. And perhaps the most important question, why? If there's a mundane explanation, why not give it? Nearly 60 years have passed. The Cold War is over. The classified programs from the 1960s have long since been declassified. What information can be so sensitive that it still cannot be revealed in 2025? The current state. Today, the Grange Reserve is just an ordinary sports field. There's no plaque. There's no official acknowledgement of what hundreds of people say happened there. Westall Secondary College, formerly high school, is still operating. Most of the current student body knows nothing about the most extraordinary event in their school's history. Investigators continue to request documents under Freedom of Information laws. They continue to interview witnesses. They continue to search for the missing photos, the missing film, any official records. So far, nothing. The witnesses are getting old. Andrew Greenwood, Marilyn Smith, Terry Peck, Joy Clarke, Colin Kelly, all are now 70 or 80 years old. Some have already passed away. With each passing year, memories are lost. Testimonies are lost. And the questions remain unanswered. Look, I can't tell you what happened in Westall on April 6, 1966. Nobody can, not with absolute certainty. Perhaps it was extraterrestrial technology. Perhaps it was a military project so advanced and secret that it still cannot be revealed 60 years later. Perhaps, though with great difficulty, it was the Hubble balloon with the worst luck in history. But what I can tell you is this. Something happened. Something real, witnessed by hundreds of people, that left physical marks, that provoked a massive official response, and that was systematically suppressed. The witnesses are not liars. They are not crazy. They are ordinary people, now grandparents, retired, respected citizens, who have never changed their story. Who, after 59 years, still say, I know what I saw. And I believe they deserve to be heard. They deserve to have their experience acknowledged as real. That they're not crazy. That something happened that's worth seriously investigating. Because in the end, the Westall case is not just about UFOs or aliens or secret technology. It's about transparency. It's about the right to know what's happening in our skies. It's about what happens when governments decide something is too sensitive for the public to know. It's about 200 people, many of them children, who looked up one Wednesday in April and saw something that changed their understanding of the world. And then they were threatened not to speak about it. If you're watching this and you were a student, teacher, or resident of Clayton South in April 1966, if you were there that day, if you have photos, documents, memories that you've never shared, your testimony matters. Your story deserves to be preserved. And for everyone else, I'll leave you with this. The next time someone tells you about something extraordinary they experienced, something they can't fully explain, maybe, just maybe, it's worth listening. Because sometimes the most incredible stories turn out to be true. Thank you for joining me in this investigation of the Westall case. If you found this video interesting, please help me reach more people by liking and sharing it. If you're new here, This channel is dedicated to investigating paranormal cases, unexplained encounters, and unsolved mysteries with the utmost rigor. No sensationalism. Just facts, testimonies, and the questions that still remain unanswered. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss upcoming cases. And let me know in the comments, what do you think happened in Westall? Alien? Military? Hannibal? Something we haven't considered yet? I would love to read your theories. And if you know of other well-documented cases of mass sightings or encounters with multiple witnesses, please let me know. I'm always looking for the next mystery to investigate. Until the next case. Take care. And remember, sometimes the truth is stranger than any fiction.